Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit. Magister Dixit.
Welcome to Magister Dixit, a podcast that invites you on a journey into realms of expertise, imagination, and occultism. Delve deep into the minds of those that have dedicated their lives to mastering their crafts, and how having an esoteric or supernatural influence has shaped that path. In each episode, we will engage with magisters, true masters of their respected fields, as they share their unparalleled insights, unconventional knowledge, and their unique perspectives. Venture into the mystical as we converse with filmmakers, musicians, and renowned authors. Listen to their perspectives on their respected disciplines and how being a practitioner of occultism has influenced their craft. Remember, in the realm of knowledge, Magister Dixit, the master has spoken. In this episode, we'll have a discussion with author Marco Visconti, a practitioner and teacher of Western Esoteric Tradition, particularly Thelema and Crowleyana. He has authored a book that focuses on the teaching, the principles, and practices of magic. The Aleister Crowley Manual, Thelemic Magick for Modern Times. Marco has a rich background, including work in the music industry as a member of the electro-industrial band XP8 and collaborations with other industrial bands. He's also been involved in the international esoteric community for over 2 decades, receiving initiations into various esoteric organizations such as the AA, Choronzon Club, and the Ordo Templi Orientis. Let's welcome Marco to the show. Okay, Marco. Well, welcome to Magister Dixit. And Marco, you've been involved in Western Esoteric Tradition for many years. How did you become interested in occult practices and esotericism? And how has your personal journey and experience influenced the content of this book?
So I got drawn to the Western Esoteric Tradition at large as a young teenager. In fact, I would say maybe as a child, in fact, because I was interested, I began to be interested in these topics already when I was like 8 or 9. And it was very, I didn't know that something like the Western Esoteric Tradition existed at the time, but I was very interested in mythology and myths and folklore and the like. And you would think that for somebody who was born and bred in Rome, in Italy, that's obvious, right? But first of all, it's not so obvious. Plenty of Italians don't really care about the past, especially, a mythical past. And when it came to me in particular, I really didn't care much for Greece or Rome history and mythology as well, right? Of course, I was born into those myths that are very closely related, but I never really resonated with them much. However, I did resonate much more with Egyptian and Celtic mythology. So, those myths and those folk stories that related to countries that were very, very far away, that at the time I'd not visited, and somehow they spoke to me more. It did help. I grew up in a big family, big house with a lot of books and very absent parents. So, I was always left on my own devices, and I was pretty much reading. And I would keep being this very, shy recluse till the end of my teenage years, really. Then things would change drastically later on. But, up until the point, that's how I spent my childhood and my adolescence, really. Mythology was my starting point. Then a few years down the line, through comic books of all things, I discovered Aleister Crowley. And the story really goes that, this strange character that seemed to me had an answer to one of the one of the issues that I was already feeling very strong inside of me, which was I didn't belong to the normal world. I didn't feel like I belonged there at all. I didn't like the normal culture of my country, of Italy. I didn't care about football or soccer, as they say in the United States. Really didn't give a shit about it. I didn't really care about sports. I really didn't care about popular music. I was into different things. And from that little window on Crowley that was presented to me in the summer of 1990 when I was 12 in a comic book, so like not the best source maybe, it seemed to me well, this guy was really feeling pretty much the same, and he created a magical system out of it. That's interesting. That's something that I should investigate. Of course, in time I would come to realize that Crowley was it was an iconoclast, but was also somebody came from extreme wealth, so extreme privilege, and his views were very his world views were very complex and very often at odds with each other, and so it was definitely not the kind of maybe a straightforward guy that I imagined him to be as a child myself, as a young teenager myself. But in a nutshell, that's how it all started. A need to get out of the choir, and the discovery of one person that seemed to have done it before me, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Let's figure out what this is all about, right? And that's been the story ever since.
That's great. And it's like your book offers practical instructions, exercises, insights into each of these topics, allowing people to explore and incorporate this into their life, but they don't have to have that background of immense wealth, or not having a large house like Boleskine to maybe perform what they would like to do and such. So yours is kind of an approach that doesn't really you don't have to be rich or have a lot of free time on your hands in order to do this.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Those things help, right? They always help. But the reality is that if you want to pursue a magical path, if you want to set up for yourself a magical practice, you don't need either. You just need the will to do it. And that means, I would say also, you need to like it. You need to, have a taste of what it's like. And if you like it, then, you should definitely pursue it. If it doesn't work for you, I mean, there are many other options out there, right? Magic with the K, Thelema, ceremonial magic, the Western Esoteric Tradition. Those are all, spokes of a wheel that has infinite spokes that all go to a center, which is what I personally call truth. And, you can find a spoke that it's well suited for yourself. And when I say yourself, I really mean, in this case, like, who you are right now. You would argue maybe your current incarnation, if you subscribe to, a reincarnation style of existence. But let's say if you don't, like whoever you feel like you are in this moment right now, right? And the reality that might also change. You might start as a Wiccan and then find out that instead your path lies elsewhere, and that's absolutely fine.
I think that's pretty common too, that people start at one point and that's where they first peek under the lid to see what's going on, and then when they're immersed in all of it, maybe you find a proclivity to a particular craft.
Yeah.
Or working.
And I would also say that I think it's important that as you go further, you fine tune your own practice, right? Like I still call myself a Thelemite, but my Thelema is very personal, and I think that's a plus, right? I mean, a lot of people, especially serious Thelemites online, will disagree with me and with this approach, because only the Thelema of Aleister Crowley, has dictated by the prophet, is the real Thelema. Anything else doesn't matter, right? That's to me the clear example of people that still haven't really done much work on themselves. They still need to belong to a specific brand, a specific group, a specific community, because they still draw their own being, their own essence from these labels they put on themselves. Like in time, it might even be that I won't call myself a Thelemite anymore, right? I'm not there yet, because I do feel that there is some truth in in the concept of Thelema as a new way of interfacing with the world, with reality, with the miracle of incarnation and of life itself. And it seems to me that we can see in the world we're living today all the hallmarks of an age of force and fire, which is, of course, they are the hallmarks of the new eon of Horus, as divined, as prophesied by Aleister Crowley, and it is channeled in the holy books of Thelema. That doesn't mean that it's a nice time to live, right? It is a time of force and then of fire, and that constantly. I think there's this interplay of stilling yourself and maybe living through relatively simpler times, because then the fire comes, and when the fire time is there for everybody to experience, if you haven't stilled yourself first, you're not going to be enjoying it. Let's put it like this.
Well, another thing they pick up from the book is that you have to emphasize that this is for everyone, and it doesn't require the elaborate tools, or you don't have to read. I remember looking at a lot of the organized Crowley-esque memberships, and it's like, read these 20 books or read these essays and then come back and see us, or before you begin or whatever. And it's like, wow, I have to do all of this before I can start to incorporate this. And and I noticed that, and even back then, a lot of the grimoires and texts, it's a lot of parables and stuff, and the meaning is hidden between the lines. And the more in sync you are with it, the more you understand maybe the the representations of what they're saying and what that really symbolizes. But for a lot of laymen's that come in today, what specific exercises or techniques from the book can readers right away begin doing their own magical practices?
Well, I would like to start by saying that, for instance, once you mentioned that if you, those long lists of material that you need to read first, to be fair, that is, the student curriculum of the AA, which is, Argentum Astrum is one of the names in the outer of the AA. So we can call it like that. The Silver Star is another. And the idea is that, the AA, the Silver Star, really is to be understood as, the postdoc of magic, right?
Right.
So, the reality is that Crowley put a lot of thought in trying to create structures and systems for Thelema, but when you look at it, they really haven't aged well at all, right? So he had this idea that the complete laymen would approach the mysteries from the outside and maybe be in a completely passive way through the Gnostic Mass and the rituals of Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, so the Gnostic Church of Thelema. And then, if you were more interested, maybe you would join the OTO, which was and still is, a paramasonic organization. So it's Masonic in nature, and the term Masonic really implies a sort of passivity as well, because you go into these rituals and things are done to you. Like, you are the recipient of rituals that are meant to convey allegories and symbologies, and you're just there, you're passive. But there is a level of engagement, a step above the one who are just, sit to and enjoy a Gnostic Mass, right? So the OTO, in its first degrees, it's more involved. And then in theory, of course, that's never the case, because the OTO of today is not the OTO that Crowley wanted it to be. But in theory, people would progress to degrees, and would become more more akin like magicians, right? And then, ideally, at some point during this stage, you would also, become an aspirant to the AA, where real magic proper is done, right? A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the magical rituals that are usually connected with Aleister Crowley, so Liber Vive Reguli, Liber 25, the Star Ruby, those are not OTO rituals, those are AA rituals. And so an OTO member, it's not required to do them. It's not even required to study them. Of course, since the OTO of today is a Frankenstein monster that cobbles things together with very little coherence behind, you will find, local lodges or oases or camps that will do lessons on this and that, but the aims of the two organizations were very different in Crowley's ideas. That's why I say it didn't age well, because of course very few people understand that.
And now, very few things do age well. That many
I agree. Absolutely.
100 years. Lovecraft comes to mind also in the way that
you would say. Absolutely. I still love Lovecraft, but the absolute racism that seeps through every pore of the pages that didn't age well, thankfully as well, I would say.
And you try to put the parameters on it of a different time and a different age and a different mindset. However,
I think Lovecraft was a horrendous, racist, xenophobe, even for his times. To be fair, and he doesn't. He doesn't hide it, right?
In the letters to his wife and to his friends, I think that's clearly stated. I think he was very xenophobic of just of the new age, even just of the.
He saw himself, as a gentleman from a bygone era, and
a relic. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was really trying to, and in this, Crowley was very different, because Crowley wanted to be a new man, even if his sexuality was a clear example of that. By today's standards, we would call Crowley a queer individual. A lot of people have been trying to really push the idea of Crowley, maybe we should call him like a probably bisexual or not. I think the term queer is more all-encompassing for Crowley's approach to his own sexuality. But we're digressing right now. Back to your question, right? So which techniques, which rituals people can take from my book and run with it? Well, the book is intended to be a manual. It's intended to have it. Basically, you can read it from one cover to the next, to the last, and you can even pick and choose, move up and down, whatever you want. But the idea is that you start at the beginning and you end at the end. And so if you've never done magic before, if you don't understand what magic is, you want to start at the very beginning, because the book will take you step by step. And so I would say that the first thing that everybody should focus on is the idea of engaging with this new worldview that implies that we are part of a bigger organism, if you want. So we are part of the universe, and the correlation between us, the microcosm, and the universe, the macrocosm, is exemplified by this invisible substance, which can be called astral light, which can be called energy, which can be called prana. They're all terms for the same thing. You can call it life force if you want. And this life force is exemplified by breathing, right? Like the fact that we stay alive by breathing, right? Famously enough, stop breathing, we're dead. And there's more to that breathing, though. There's a subtler layer that goes beyond our scientific understanding of bringing in a certain compound and changing it to oxygen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what the trees does. We don't do photosynthesis, but you know what I mean. Like, yes, that's the point. But the idea is that what we can do, though, with that oxygen is bring in this pranic energy, and that is the fuel of all the magic that there is. In the book, I say famously because it's been at the center of various little dramas online, that if you don't know how to breathe, you're not doing magic, and it doesn't matter what you think or what other books will tell you, or other people will tell you. This created a bit of a scandal because there was a lot of some people that were saying, well, the grimoires never speak of breathing, this or that never speak of breathing. And for me, it's really a moot point, because especially when we look at the grimoire tradition, first of all, it's a broken tradition. We don't really know what the whole extent of that tradition looked like. I guess we'll never will. And the grimoires themselves are, in fact, almost like shorthand of more complex sets of ideas that are lost in time. And I am ready to bet, maybe because we will never be able to prove it, right? But let's say I'm ready to bet that if we had the full extent of all the ins and outs of these older traditions, breathing would be a core part of the whole process. Because again, like even if you just want to stay in a circle and read or memorize and then go through a whole long incantation, well, guess what? You have to know your breathing patterns, because I mean I've been a musician for a long time, and I was always like I was never the singer, but even though if I was doing like backing vocals, if you're in the middle of the performer, in the moment you get to the microphone, if you're short on breath, the performance is not good, right?
Yes, absolutely.
As you as a musician, you will know it as well yourself. So
yes.
So I would say that like if you want to. Yeah, one takeaway from the book, start at the beginning and learn to breathe, really. And, it seems like such an obvious and boring idea, but the problem is how many people really spend time with themselves. So in an introspective, even maybe a meditative or even contemplative state, just focusing on one simple task. That is how you start building up that focus, that concentration that is then needed for further steps of the magical practice. And I would like also to say that, this focus on an embodied practice or on this focus on an embodied practice is really like at the core of the magic with the K that Crowley put together, which is a different thing than ceremonial magic. Magic with the K is this unique blend of Eastern traditions, pranayama, control of breathing, that's one, and Medianers as well, and then Western traditions, which is, for instance,
Hermetic elements.
Hermetic traditions, exactly.
Right.
Correct.
Very interesting. And what I have to agree with you is no matter which path that you pick up, really, and you look at, always the key things are breathing, imagination, and meditation.
Especially imagination, I think it's an important one, and a lot of people I figured out over the years, since I started teaching the subjects to a wider set of crowd, I would say, I realized that a lot of people struggle with it, struggle with imagination, struggle with visualization, especially, right? I didn't really know that because I have a very active mind's eye. I close my eyes, I can see things very clearly in great detail. I can make it interactive. I can make it in 3D. I can do things with this. With these things in my head, and then I realized that in fact a lot of people, and I might be wrong, but I've noticed that there's been an increase in recent years, and I might know why. But more and more people in recent years have been reporting that they suffer from aphantasia, which means they just see black and nothing else, right? No, there's nothing else in their mind's eye. I guess that's what I read various studies about it, and a lot of people point out, academics point out to the idea that since we are living more and more in a visual culture, we went from reading books to watching TikToks, and that's the sad reality of it.
And reading is becoming a almost antiquated discipline
I mean, look what we're doing right now, right? This would have been like a written interview like 10 years ago, right?
Yes, yes.
Maybe even 5 years ago. And now it really is all video or audio or more interactive and multimedia channels.
And even to break up that interview, I would probably put some pictures in there to visually kind of keep people going, because just 10 pages of text would be, it's just the way I think the psyche is. It needs to see some of that visualization as well.
Absolutely. And I think that, but at the same time, this has kind of impeded the ability for folks to become more apt at using their mind's eye. I might be completely wrong, right? Like it's just
I tend to agree with you in an age where you can put things in Chat GPT or into an AI, or put on your goggles and be in another world and be able to manipulate those things and stuff, that when you strip all that stuff away, it's like people forget those basic core tools of imagination. It kind of reminds me of kids running around, young kids running around with just like sticks and stuff, and they're pretending that they're cops and robbers, or Indians and cowboys and such. It's like whereas now if you asked kids to go do that, they'd probably like just look at you like you're crazy, like give me my game system, or put the movie in front of me, or
You're absolutely right. And I guess, maybe this ages us, right? Maybe, you if somebody listening to this and it's like, under the age of 25 will just say, what is this too old?
Well, we were always taught with just a little bit of, we were always taught that just with a little bit of imagination, all the wondrous things that you could do. And I don't think so much that that's really enforced anymore.
That's it, right? Also, what's interesting, that I remember around 10, 15 years ago, when the very, very early attempts at creating, a virtual reality temple setup were reattempted, and everybody was so excited about it. And 15 years later, 20 years later, we still haven't done much with it, but we definitely have the technology now. I remember that back in the day, I was already thinking, this is not good, because one massive part of this experience is the ability to journey into deeper level of yourself, or your psyche, if you want to use a more like psychological model towards magic. But you going inside, an inward journey, right? And in this inward journey, a key component for its success is being able to create images in your mind's eye that for your inner self to inhabit. If you just are given like virtual temples, you lose that. It's not there anymore. One of the techniques in my book is a path working exercise, which I call like the Astral Temple of Malkuth, and that's a way to communicate passively some ideas that maybe are already rooted into us. So almost like to awaken sort of archetypes, which is in the case of that particular exercise, the hermetic elements, the 4 elements. You have like water, fire, air, and earth. And then of course, like by doing that, you're awakening the spirit. And then, the idea is that maybe there might be like some elementals that can come and greet you. A lot of people actually ask me, why didn't you do like a VR of this? Like, can we have a VR of this? Can we do this? And in the multimedia section of my book, which is something everybody with the book can join my online community for free, and there is a section there where there's a series of videos, a series of audios, all things that can help the book to get more out of the exercises. And I did record that whole path working with some visual stimuli as well. What I noticed is that a lot of people then have never been able to do that exercise without my recording, whereby the idea is that, you can use the recording, you can use the visual stimuli as a stepping stone, but the idea is that you want to memorize the steps, you want to memorize the images, because you want to go there yourself. And it's important. It's almost like if you have this kind of aids, of external aids, you're always going to go and lean on them.
It's crutch. It's crutch. Exactly. And you're looking to pull away that crutch and say, no, do it on your own, the same way you would somebody who's learning to walk again or something. You'd be like, no, don't use the crutches. You need to start walking again, on your own.
Exactly. Absolutely. And unfortunately, I noticed that, I got a lot of comments like that, right? But without it, it's difficult. It's like, yeah, it's meant to, right? It is meant to be difficult. It is meant for you to challenge yourself a little bit, so that you can actually, go and do more complex things later on. Because, as I state very clearly in the book, all these practices are stepping stone to something else. They are stepping stones to what it's called the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which is just a fancy name to describe a very transformative, very personal, but fundamental step in the pursuit of the great work, in the pursuit of high magic, of the goal of high magic itself. Well, the only way you can get there is if you've trained all these skills before. And if you haven't, I don't know, maybe you're just like never going to have that experience, which I would say it's not easy to obtain, but it's not impossible, right? There are even successive initiations, successive steps that were very hard, and that I would say that maybe most people will never experience in one incarnation or in this current incarnation, right? And that's absolutely fine. It's not about like, I have more spiritual badges on my my body of light and I'm better. It's about, in fact, what I learned is that the more you get those spiritual badges, the more life becomes challenging and it's almost like you open yourself to more challenges. You tell the universe and say, hey, I'm ready. Send me more, and the universe will comply very gleefully. It will comply. So in many ways, though, the knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel is fundamental to open yourself to the true understanding of magic, but it is an opening too. Like the real understanding will come, much further down the line. The problem is that without teaching yourself the skills, without nurturing the skills, which are as simple and maybe as boring as breathing, concentrating, and visualizing, or if you really cannot visualize, nurturing that mythical imagination, if you want, I think you are going to have problems. Right? You're going to have some issues down the line.
So pretty much in line with that topic, shed light on your concept of true will.
So, question by from that's worth $1 million, right? I think that Crowley, let's put it like this. When I started to try and understand what true will was, I had Crowley's references, right? And Crowley gives you always does this, right? But especially when it comes to the concept of true will, it gives you a lot of different explanations for it, commentaries on it, and oftentimes they seem, as I said before, they seem very in contradiction with one another. True will has been described as your purpose, right? What you are here to do. That's it. Like you're the way for you to discover your best self, your healed self, so that you can embody your purpose. And I'm using this incredibly loaded vocabulary because that's what you hear, what you find in today's discourse. Because when you hear about the best version of yourself, the healed version of yourself, I mean, you're hearing somebody selling you the promise of healing, the promise of a simpler, better life, I don't know, more money, more success, more charisma, more everything, right? What I learned is that true will, which, by the way, it's a term that's never found in the Holy Books of Thelema, especially not in the Book of the Law in Liber Alve Legis, which is the central Holy Book of Thelema, the first one and the one that contains all the spells and all the mysteries of Thelema. You never hear about true will. This is, in fact, a term that Crowley would use, and then he would popularize in his writings. But in the Book of the Law, it is written about pure will. And the concept of pure, I mean, the term itself, it almost like lends to a nuance about this, and the idea that something that's pure is unsullied, right? It almost has no real connection with the personal self. It's not something that I want. It's not the best version. It's not something that can have anything to do with the best version of myself, the healed version of myself, because that self is in itself, sorry for the plain words, it's in itself an illusion that you have to transcend, you have to leave behind. True will is transpersonal. It's almost like a stream of in, let's say, direction. It's a vector. It's something that once you raise your consciousness to that point, to that level, you enter this stream and you're going towards a direction. Okay, where is this direction? It's difficult to put into words without selling it, without simplifying it. But I would say that the direction that can be ascertained is a move from duality, from the understanding of, I and thou, me and you, myself and the holy guardian angel, myself and the rest of the world. It moves from this, this perception of duality into a realization of unity, that moment where the two becomes one, which is not a Spice Girls song, but it's the moment where this unity is finally obtained. But that direction goes for, like, that vector goes beyond that as well, because that unity also dissolves into nothingness at some point. So that is what true will really is, and so that is what true will is at its core, right? And I think I'm doing a horrible job at trying to put into words what cannot really be put into words.
No, I think you're doing a good job of that. Absolutely.
I thank you for your kindness, but I every time I hear myself speaking about these things, why am I still trying? It's not possible. Something else that should be said, though, is that it is true that, as you enter that stream of direction, it is true that a lot of the things you seemed hell-bent on, you seem that they really, defined yourself, they lose importance. I hear a lot of people that say, I discovered my true will and I broke up with my girlfriend of 5 years. I left my job. My life changed completely. Everything was horrible for a while. These things can happen if you are someone who, has a lot of work to do still, because the first thing that the universe does as you move from duality into nothingness the universe tells you that it almost shakes you, like it really has a way of shaking you so hard that a lot of the things you think defined you cease to exist, cease to have any importance. And so in the absence of those, in the vacuum that is formed by those things disappearing, a new focus on things that are more in tune with your own orbit and in your own part in the stream of direction appears, right? This is how it goes usually, right? But then again, another thing is that I really try to stress out to the nth level is that, when it comes to the experience of the true will, everyone is different. There's no two identical ones. And to the point that, again, if somebody tells you, oh, I had this exact experience, I think they're lying. I mean, there's no mince with words. Like it's so unique. It's
subjective to the person experiencing.
Exactly. Like it is subjective to the point that becomes, again, transpersonal, but the way you get there, the way you experience these things, it's unique to you at first. And this is also why, there's no go-to ritual. You do this ritual and boom, you got the true will. Crowley, in fact, is very, very, very clear about this. In the Scholium, in the third point of the commentary of the third point of Liber Samec, he really tells you that your experience will be your own, your ritual will be your own. Liber Samec itself, the Abramelin operation, the headless rite, those are all ideas. Those are all almost like blueprints of how this thing is done. But a blueprint is not a recipe, because a recipe is something you can just have to copy it like directly, like this is it, that's it. A blueprint is something that you can and you should put your own spin on it and create your own thing out of it. I'm going to teach a full course on this starting at the end of the month, in fact, in the end of October 2023. And, something that I'm writing, I've been writing the material for a while. I'm writing the material these very days as well. And I'm really constantly saying, okay, I showed you this ritual. If you think that this is the ritual you need to have this experience, you're fooling yourself. First of all, you cannot do any of all these rituals imply that mastery of pretty much all the basic techniques that I taught in the book, I wrote about in the book. But in general, you've done that, you want to attempt something else, those are all rituals that should inspire you. And there's always one key takeaway, and that is that the idea that you have to remove yourself for a sizable amount of time from the rest of the world. Like you have to go away from the hustle and bustle of normal life, because what's really happening here is that the Holy Guardian Angel, which doesn't matter if it's internal of you, if external of you, if it's part of your psyche, your inner self, your superconscious, or if it's an external spirit, you shouldn't care about that at all. What you should understand is that there is a voice that has been telling you what you need to do in order to unite with it since the moment you came into this world. And this is for everybody, right? This is to everybody. Famously, as a little detour, famously, the lineage of the AA, which is in close alliance with the OTO, teaches that not everybody has an Holy Guardian Angel. Only them have it, because it's a cult of personality, and it really is a cult by all means. Like, they only them are the few and secrets promised in the Book of the Law, and so only them have the Holy Guardian Angel. We are at this level of mental insanity and illness, but the point is that everybody can hear that voice. The problem is that voice is drowned into a horrendous cacophony. And the only really way to start focusing on its call, is by pretty much like going the way of the monk for a good period of time. Famously, the Abramelin operation said 6 months. Then the tradition, which is what I did. But then, and I did it in the late 90s. And then, the new edition by Georg Dan came a few years later. And lo and behold, it's not 6 months. It's supposed to be 18 months. The reality there is that apparently right now, yet a new edition is coming soon. And there's going to be some changes to that as well. As usual with the Grimoire tradition, it's a broken tradition. We don't know, right? We don't know which one is which, right?
And I think that's always something too. People are always trying to articulate the lineage and you know what, and I don't know. I think if something just works, it works, and whether it's you could trace it back to the original people who kind of brought it to the Western world. I mean, it's been around long enough that other people have looked at it and investigated it and critiqued it, and and wrote books about it.
And but the point that remains constant is, for me at least, is this need to do this experience after a long period of preparation, and then a seclusion from the world for a period of time. It's interesting because a lot of the way this experience has been sold, I would say, in not just in recent years, but since I have memory myself. So there's always like shortcuts to initiations. There's always way of doing it in a weekend. There's always way of doing it, with a bunch of sigils and just chanting some weird names in it. I found out that some of these techniques do give you like a fake positive, like a false positive. Like they almost like jolt something in your system, in your body of light, that you almost like get up to the surface, or almost imagine like you're swimming underwater and you get up to the surface, you see the sun, and then you go back down into the depths, and usually you go in quite deeper than you were before. So like I would never suggest any sort of shortcuts. But then again, that's also why I don't sell many courses.
Well, and you do see that people like how they've tweaked the LBRP, or how they do the middle pillar, or how and it's like their little nuances. And to me, it's like, shouldn't that just kind of stay their nuance? And perhaps you should find your own nuances to incorporate that makes it more individualized for you, more customized for your experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we talk about all the benefits that you could gain from incorporating this into your life. How's it personally enriched your life?
I can tell you how it made my life worse. In the sense that, wanting to live a magical life is wanting to become something else than the average person in the world that surrounds you. And that is almost always problematic, because you almost always end up realizing that a lot of the things that people live for are meaningless, or at least, they are not as important as they and society propose them to be. And then, there's also the point that if you decide to go down this path and walk it for a while, there's a moment where you have to make a choice, and the choice is either most completely disappear, or coming back and speak about your experiences, right, like we're doing right now. The problem is that when you do that, you always end up attracting attrition of various sorts. So in many ways, magic has enhanced my life, because it made me realize that this world is not the only thing we have. Like this embodied experience is not the only experience we are going to have. What we call we is not what we truly are, and it also completely, all this series of realizations have disappeared completely the fear of death. There's which is one of the most hard-rooted, or maybe like the most difficult fear to just get rid of as a human being. Like the fear of death. There's no fear of death. Like I can die tonight, and I know that it's not just like I think, I hope, I know that there will be something else that happens after, right? There's like life, which is life will end, but then death will begin, and then that experience of death is something. I mean, it's like a series of realizations that go beyond even the term of realization. It's to use maybe an over-abused term, it's the idea of gnosis, unfettered knowledge, something you just know because you have experienced it. Okay. But the problem is that, like, with this, it also comes with a lot of, it just like, it just almost like this realization put a target on your back. Like, people around you will either want a piece of that or will want to tear it away from you. And I've seen this becoming even, again, it's always been like this, but it got worse in the last few years. Maybe because of the fact that our society is imploding under the weight of social media and the economic collapse and wars and whatnot. So everybody is we're literally living at the end of times. I don't want to sound like too apocalyptic, especially because from a Thelemic standpoint, the apocalypse did happen in 1904. That was the moment where when we received the Book of the Law and the new Eon came out along, right? So, but the problem is the apocalypse it's going to last for a while, and
it's not just over in a day or two.
No, especially because the meaning of apocalypse is revelation. It's that's the original meaning in Greek. So it's a revelation, and to reveal something takes a long time, right?
Some people look as also the end of times as the ending of the Pisces era and moving into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, but it will take some time, I guess, before we fully get there. In Thelemic, in the book I speak of the concept of succession of the eons. So what an eon is, and the fact that maybe it's all made up, but it doesn't matter because we see that something is happening. We are experiencing it, and so the reality here is that we're in for a bumpy ride for a much longer time, possibly till the end of our mortal lives. And so what I noticed is that those targets on the back became a bit harder to bear because especially in the last few years, during the lockdowns, the lockdown years, the early years of the pandemic, everybody was on their best behavior. Everybody was like really, everybody was so shocked and so traumatized by this worldwide event that none of us ever saw it coming. Don't believe any of these, astrologers or tarot readers that said, well, I saw it coming. I remember no one was seeing it coming, especially because we were living in times that, they started to feel a bit shaky, but it wasn't all that bad up until it hit the way it did. And so, the very first years of the pandemic, which, by the way, the book came because of that, because I found myself at home. I found myself.
You had lots of extra time on your hands.
Extra time, and exactly. And I started this online community. To be very honest with you, as a way of making some extra money, because my previous job evaporated during the pandemic. I was a consultant and was working in logistics. Imagine that. Gone, right?
Yeah.
And he never came back, by the way. So that's almost like part of.
And that's what a lot of things too. A lot of things just have not come back.
In a way for me to make a little bit of money, I started Patreon, and I was like, I'm going to talk about magic, and maybe somebody will show up. And by 6 months in, I had like 200 people, and so that community grew up, and it really felt at the beginning like the best of times. It really felt like everybody was really involved into this and really trying to make it work. Everybody was trying to be kind to each other, as human nature tends to do. That blissful moment didn't last, and the last in counterpoint to that is the last maybe year and a half, let's say the last year has been, I never saw it this bad. Like the esoteric community has always been a bunch of loonies. The online community has always been a bunch of loonies times ever. It's the worst of both worlds times 100, right? It really is. It hasn't been good, and so this is the counterpoint of living a magical life, is that you decide to come back and you decide to share your experiences, and a lot of people will want to see you not succeed in the best of days or dead in the worst of days, right?
Well, I think with almost any endeavor that you try, I don't really see that much support for anybody granting people support these days. Like, you can do it, or,
there isn't.
It's all the reason. Everything's very negative. Why you're going to fail, or why it's not a good time to start a business, or why you're wasting your time.
Yeah, and again, it's so different from literally 3 years ago, which seems like 30 years ago in my head. But like 3 years ago, everybody was like, oh, we're in this together. I mean, here in the UK, we had this thing, club for the NHS. The NHS is the free healthcare system that we have here in the UK. And of course, all the nurses or the doctors were there frontline dying. And so you had this thing where, you were clapping for them. 3 years later, they the government slash their pensions, slash their income. It's like it almost feels like a bad novel or a bad movie, but it's happening.
Well, it's
happening on every level.
Yeah, it's bizarro world. You said over like what just happened. You explained in the UK. In the US, you had all the frontline workers, the nurses, and the doctors before there was any type of vaccine, putting themselves in jeopardy. And it was like, we should applaud these people. They're heroes. They're, and then it was like, well, you need to take the shot. And these people were like, well, I don't need to. I've already been infected. And they started bringing science into the equation about autoimmune, their autoimmune systems and stuff. It was like, well, if you don't get it, you're fired. And they literally fired thousands of people from hospitals, and
I think it's been very badly managed on every level.
Absolutely, and something tells me I don't think we're done with it yet. There's still a little saber rattling going on about, that we've got to, the next time it comes, we've got to, do this and that. And, it's like,
it's really, like you said, it's bizarro world. And again, a magical life can help you shelter yourself from this insanity. But the problem is that the more you do that, the more people will notice. And like I said, some people will want to be part of it in a positive way. Some people will want to be part of it in a very negative way. So, long story short, I would still think that everybody needs magic in their lives because, again, you need tools to survive this long, weird apocalypse. But just know that it's not going to be beautiful things, right? It's
not just a flick of a switch and everything's honky-dory. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Well, to change gears a little bit, I wanted to bring up about Francesco Demetri, the Italian science fiction author, and apparently he paid tribute to you in one of his works, and there was a film adaptation of it. Please tell me all about that.
So that's interesting. Francesco is a very old friend. We met on the internet, in fact, but this was the late 90s. And at the time, he was studying anthropology, which I just finished. In fact, I just got my master's done at the time. And he's few years younger than me. So he was just going through it. And he was studying, online pagans, which was a new thing at the time. And I was already writing on various forums. So we got in touch and we started talking. We became good friends. And in the meantime, he became quite a successful author in Italy. And then now he's been living here in London as well for a long time. And he's been publishing his books in English as well. But the thing is that he writes this sort of urban fantasy whereby he always write about realistic places in Italy. His original books were in Rome, where we were both living at the time, but now most of his books are based in Puglia, which is originally from, so in the south of Italy. And so it's always this realistic world that then at some point, is invaded by magic, and how do the people react and whatnot. In his early novels, the ones that were they're only published in Italian, there are three three where I am present, and then there's a couple more where I'm just named. There's this character which was literally like named after me. Well, the name is Dagon because at the time I was going as Azrael, so he didn't want to use Azrael, so he used Dagon, and it was basically person in his mid-20s that came from an old family, and then he was working as a DJ in the alternative world, but in fact he was an expert of everything magical. And the first book, which is called La ragazza dei miei sogni, which means the girl of my dreams, which, I'm not going to tell you what the book is about because it's a big spoiler, right? So if you ever want to read the book read the book, I don't know if you can because it's only in Italian, but the movie came out in 2017. And it should be like, if not dubs, definitely not dubs, but like subtitles.
What was the title of the movie?
The Girl of My Dreams.
So same as the book.
Yeah, same as the book. Okay. And so basically, like this character.
And this is an Italian film?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The movie is okay, right? It was done with a decent budget, but it wasn't like in an Hollywood style movie, right? But it's not too bad, in fact. And so the cinematography is great. The actors are very well-known actors in Italy. The guy that played my part is this guy called Nicolas Valporidis, which is very like A-star Italian actor.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, which was so funny because at the time I was already living in London, and we were having chats over Skype at the time because he wanted to know more about who I was. He didn't know anything about magic, so he was very, very keen on learning what this was all about. And to be fair, like he did a very good job at portraying a 27-year-old version of me, being a DJ in the goth alternative scene.
That's
and then
great.
Also being like a magician. Of course, he looks way better than me. Like he is, like imagine like a classically handsome guy. But it's like, I mean, there's worse things that can happen in your life, I suppose.
And you said that's available. What is it like DVD or streaming or something?
So last time I checked, because I have the Blu-ray. So it is on Blu-ray. Okay. I don't know, and the movie did have a big distribution in Italy, and it was on Amazon Prime for a while, but I don't know if it still is, right? In fact, I'm very tempted to get the movie out from the Blu-ray and then upload it somewhere myself.
right, just to get it out there.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, it's not a bad movie. It's not as good as the novel. The novel is way better. And,
I'll definitely be looking for both. I wish that there was a English version of the book, though.
Unfortunately, there isn't, because eventually Francesco moved to London and started writing new things in English. If you want to have a taste of what Francesco writes, you can read his English novels, Never the Wind, and which is the last one, and the previous one was called The Book of Hidden Things. I really like The Book of Hidden Things.
Are you still in touch with him now that he's in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, he lives like down the road, pretty much.
Oh, fantastic! Oh, that's great. So he's one of your buddies.
Well, I mean, we used to be closer, and then life, especially the last few years, everything gets in how it is, right? And right now he eventually bought a house back in Puglia, right? It's this very, very old house and needs a lot of work. He's been working, and they're not married, but he and his partner, they've been working on this house since last 4 years now, and of course through the pandemic, through everything, it's very complicated. So they spend most of the time over there. But yeah, I mean, last time I saw him was 2 years ago or something like that. But we keep in touch, right? And I really, really, really love those books. There's the second book, which is called Pan, the god Pan or Peter Pan. That is a masterpiece. I think it's a really, really good book. It's a very difficult book. There's some very heavy themes, but it's beautiful. I mean, that would make an incredible movie, to be fair. But unfortunately, that's another one that has never been translated.
Right. Well, it's maybe something eventually go back and have somebody do for them, or even like audiobooks these days. You get somebody, which actually brings me to another question. You had Peter Lavella do the foreword for your book. How did that come about?
So I got in touch with Peter on Facebook many years ago because I accused him of being a Nazi, which was something that was presented to me with a series of evidence, and the most compelling of them all, but then again I figure out that it was all very manipulated, was the fact that he had ties with various people that were clearly not decent human beings. So Peter just took the time to, instead of like shouting over me, which is what usually happens online, took the time to actually make me realize that I was an idiot, and realizing that, and we've been in very good connection ever since.
So you guys had a serious dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, not a sit down, because we never met in real life, unfortunately, but we've been like having very long conversation for it's been quite some time now.
But that's not the status quo of these days. Normally, like you said, that would have been a point counterpoint conversation, and then
exactly
blocked or whatever.
I'll be honest. I figure out that to save my sanity, I just tend to block these days. But I'm also removing myself from social media almost completely.
It's toxic for sure.
It's just not good enough anymore.
I think the reoccurring theme for me when I talk with other people, it's just that human interaction was meant to be done in person.
You're right. I agree with you.
And to see the mannerisms, and even like doing this, if we were just on the telephone, it wouldn't really be the same. I could see you, you could see me, and you could see if I am pleased with what you're saying, and vice versa. There's a lot of body language involved, and all of that just goes out the window. So it's like our primordial monkey brains, I think, just it just kind of makes you very defensive, and or even with accusations and stuff. It's like.
And I'll be very honest with you. I've been guilty of doing that myself.
Well, I think it brings the worst out of us. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it really did bring the worst out of me. Especially in the last few years. So, my approach nowadays is just like, I'm just a preventive block. B, I'm in fact just disappearing from social media. Like, I will always be there to share my updates. If I have something to say, I write it down on Medium, I will still make the occasional, YouTube video. I used to do live streams pretty regularly, but then it became like creating content as opposed of having something to say.
Right. So instead of just making your content.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't want to create content. I want to if I have something to say, I'll do a live stream, right? I'll do a video. But anyway, back to Peter. We got to know each other better. And then, when I left the OTO in 2018 and wrote my pieces on why I left the OTO and went into very gruesome details, Peter contacted me because he had his own stories. Like, Peter was never a member of OTO, but he was a very close friend of pretty much everybody who went to become the leaders of OTO. Everybody was hanging out at Magical Child in New York, late 70s, early 80s. And, that group is a group of people that eventually became the current leaders of OTO. And Peter didn't join because they had fascistic tendencies ever since. That's what he says. And I agree with him, to be fair. So we became closer friends. We had a lot of very interesting discussions about our experiences with Michael Berthiaud, the system of Michael Berthiaud, which might or might not, become a book someday. But there's when you have so many projects, you never know what actually manifest, right? And the thing is that like for me it was like the obvious choice for to ask for a forward because I love his books. I love the way that he is able to speak of a vast variety of subjects with understanding of the subjects. Is like I don't know if you ever read his Lovecraft Code trilogy. It's very interesting. It's one of those classic books where you think that some of the events that are presented as novels, novelizations, might have been happened somehow, right? And in general, he's a very very smart individual with a clear open mind about whatever is what we would call the phenomena, right? Like the phenomena, like it's not just magic. Like there's this strange, because magic is the tool, right? But then this tool, in fact, interfaces you with a series of experiences that can be seen. Some people would call it it's ufology, some people would say it's woo-woo, some people would say it's the mystery, right? Like that's always what I've always been very interested in, because magic, it's not just about the low magic, the sorcery of making things happen, or the high magic of connecting with a holy angel. There's also something in between, which is, okay, how can I make sense of the strange happenings around me, but also in the world at large? And can I establish like a channel of contact with these other intelligences? Can this intelligence teach me something? Can I interact with them? Right? That has really always been like at the core of Peter Levenda's work, and so for me it was like, let's see if he's gonna be up to write an introduction or a forward on a book of magic, which it's like for here, I guess it's gonna be like very boring stuff for somebody who's been doing it like since before I was born. And Peter is like a few years older than my dad, so you can imagine it literally could be like my actual father. And he loved the book, and he wrote an incredibly nice forward, but also I would say that I've been very blessed because then the at the end there's other very kind words from David Southwell, which is it's a very well-known name here in the UK. He never really promoted himself very much. He never wrote much outside of very specific circles, so I guess that in the States very very few people will know of his name. But David has been at the center of the rebirth of a folklore against fascism, if you want, right? There's the idea of like engaging with the folklore here in the UK, but without becoming blood and soil, without becoming ultra nationalist approaches. And if anybody's curious, he's been running this thing called Hookland on Twitter, or X, whatever it's called these days, for a decade now. And it's basically like it's free content. You just have to go on Twitter, and it's all little short stories that create a wider narrative of a county here in England that may or may not exist, or maybe it exists, it's just that you remember it differently from everyone else. It's a place you've been, but you can never find on the maps. That's that kind of approach, which is also related with ideas of anthology, with the idea of, as David called it, landscape punk, or psychogeography. So it's a way of re-embodying magic, not so much in the physical body, but in the land itself around you, which is something that I think it's very important, because it's going beyond to this idea that magic can only be done in a lodge with the tools, and that's it, right? I mean, that's a style, but there's so much more than that.
Yeah, in fact, I was listening to another podcast, and the individual that was conducting it was saying they work in a bookstore, which I want to get to you about too. You worked at Treadwell Books, so I want to have you speak about that a little bit also. But they were saying, and I believe this bookstore was in Northern California that this person was describing. He said they actually have several rooms and altars that they have there for people to come practice, because not everybody can have a dedicated room, and not everybody, maybe you live with a roommate, or you live with your family, and you want to do this on your own. I just thought that was the first time I ever really heard of somebody setting up something like that, where you could come here and schedule time at this altar, and you could do your own thing and everything. And I thought that was a real kind of bohemian approach. Yeah. But like I had just said, so you worked at Treadwell Books, and I definitely subscribe to the mailing list, and I see just a lot of goings on at Treadwell. I've watched interviews with other notable authors done at Treadwell Books. When did you work there? How long? And what type of experiences did you have while you were there? Did it increase your learned approach to magic?
So I've been a friend of the owner and guiding spirit of Treadwell's book, Christina Oakley Harrington, since Treadwell's was started 20 years ago. In fact, I used to come to London over the weekends to DJ, goth parties, and then on the next day I would show up at Treadwell's in a terrible, sorry state, but still go and browse, because we had nothing like that in Italy at the time. There was nothing at all. There in Rome, there's famously a Masonic bookshop called ASEC, which has been there since forever, but you would never found something else that Julius Evola, René Guénon, traditionalism, perennialism, Masonic teachings. You would only find that. And while I'm interested in Masonry, I'm a Freemason. At the time, I was looking for something different. So Treadwell's was an incredible place. Eventually, I moved to London, and I realized that the job I was doing, before the pandemic, was for my family's business, which was this consulting firm focused on logistics. But it was something that was generating a lot of money for very little work. So I was very lucky, and I had a lot of free time. And so I was like, what I'm going to do with that free time, especially at the time I was also transitioning out of my career as a musician. I've been a touring musician, a full-blown musician and a DJ from pretty much around the year 2000, 1999, 2000 till 2014, when I decided to step back because I had a good run.
And that was in the industrial genre.
Industrial goth, industrial dance, and I don't know, industrial EBM. You don't million different titles for this.
Well, these days, we like to splinter everything down into this nice little package.
Little package. I mean, the music I was making was dance music for goths and metalheads, right? Imagine something like that. Right? And so like that. I had that run with that, and it was very good. Then it started dying down, and I also wanted to do different things. I was moving to London. I was coming out of a very hard time in my life. I lost my mother. I almost lost my father as well, and those are my only family. I had no one else. I have no siblings, no real connections with my extended family, really. So I was like, okay, a lot of things have been happening. I'm moving to London, and the first year I tried to see if I wanted to keep going in the industrial scene as a DJ, as a musician. I really didn't care for it, and so I was looking for something else to fill those extra hours that now they were like empty. And Christina at the same time was put out like an announcement because they were hiring, they were expanding the what had been at that time almost like a one woman show. Just Christina was running it for 10 years at the time, right? So I joined, and then I spent almost 4 years and a half there. And it's been an interesting experience because everybody, everybody has this idea of the esoteric esoteric bookshops as these magical places, right? But you trust me, behind the facade there's a lot of work. It's very grimy. It's very like with everything, right? But I loved it. I loved every day of it. Really, it was like always steam, like seeped in books all the time. I got to know a lot of people that I only read about before, because Treadwell's was, I don't know if it still is, to be fair, because the pandemic changed a lot of things, but it was a place where you would go just hang out every night, because there would be an event pretty much every night. It's not like this anymore, but it used to be up until 2018, definitely. There would be an event every night. Christine was very, very generous. Like you would be able to have a glass of wine for £1, which in London is unheard of. Exactly. So it was also had an eye to be very inclusive, open to everybody, and no matter how deep your purse was, right? And we would also cater to Nicolas Cage and his son. Was famously coming every Christmas time and buy off the bookshop. We had Ryan Adams, not Brian Adams, but Ryan Adams, like the singer-songwriter, coming once and just pretty much like renting, invading the entire. Basically, he came in and said, "Hey, I really love your bookstore. Can I come and do a little intimate gig here?" And we all thought he would just show up with his guitar and play. He'd show up with a full production team. That they came in 6 hours. They came in, they moved everything, they created a stage with full mixing board, got 200 people in. The guy went on for almost an hour, fantastic show, and then they all set it up on their own. And then he invited us to his gig at the Royal Albert Hall, where we had backstage access and everything. It's great. So we had a lot of situations like this, because one thing that all the esoteric bookshops in London, like we have Treadwell's, of course, you have Atlantis Bookshop, and you have Watkins, which is not the same as my publisher. I'm published by Watkins Publishing. Watkins Bookshop, they're not the same team, but they are owned by the same person. Anyway, you find you get a lot of like celebrities showing up at this place. Like Jimmy Page famously shows up very often at Atlantis Bookstore.
I was going to ask that about Treadwell's.
I mean, like you see him very often around. He's still very much interested in Thelema and Aleister Crowley.
I had the chance when I was in Brazil. I went to a macumba shop that he frequents.
Yeah. I mean, like he's a serious practitioner. Has been forever, really. To be fair.
Do you know if he still has his collection, his Crowley collection?
As far as I know, yes, he does. Like he has a lot of interesting things.
Because he does have a lot of things. Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
I think was it Kenneth Anger had displayed like some of the stuff that was donated from Jimmy Page for an event.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Jimmy Page has been one of the biggest collectors of Crowleyana since forever. So in London working at Treadwell's, but I would hear the same from people working at Watkins and working at Atlantis. You get famous people through the door all the time, and it was fun. It was definitely a fun experience. It's also thanks to Treadwell's and thanks to Christina, to be fair. So I have to thank her really. She convinced me to start teaching these topics, because at the time I was only doing classes for my OTO lodge, because I remember at the time I was an OTO member. I was pretty much me and a couple of others that were doing it and trying to teach some magic to OTO folks. And then I was in the AA you get assigned like a student or more students, and you have a direct rapport with them. So Christina actually was the one who convinced me. It all started in 2016 with a book. So think about it, only like 7 years ago, with a book on the best books of Thelema, because our idea was like, okay, since at the time, Treadwell's was more known to be like the Wiccan shop or the witchcraft shop, because Christina is a Wiccan priestess and she is a very well-known figure in that community. But we also had a lot of Crowley, because Crowley is the thing that sells the most. Like Crowley sells all the time, always, right? And so it was like, why don't we just put together a way of selling rare Crowley or even like paperbacks, but we just get people in and you tell them which book is interesting, right? And I remember that's how it started. And then after that night, a lot of people had a lot very nice things to say, and so the idea was like, okay, let's teach, let's put together other classes, really. And from that when eventually I left Treadwell's, it's very interesting. I left Treadwell's in 2018 because my family business, the consulting logistic business, was supposed to pick up. And then, like a year half later, it collapsed. But anyway, this is what life is about, right? So I left Treadwell's, but that's also, when the collapse happened, I was like, you know what? I can try and do the same thing online and see if anybody is going to be interested. And they were, right? And so, from that, the community came. More classes. I mean, this week, in a few days, I'm doing a class online class at the College of Psychic Studies on esoteric Freemasonry, and then the book came out. So at the end of the day, it is really thanks to Christina and Treadwell's she set me up to on this path where I was like, yeah, maybe I can share my experience on these topics to a wider audience. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you, what is next for you? Is there a second book in the works? Do you have an idea of what that may be? Anything you care to share?
So first and foremost is like what's coming in next, as in immediately next. In a few weeks' time, I will debut my next course, which is called the Holy Guardian Angel Experience. And as I mentioned briefly before, this is going to be a shorter course because my courses usually last, and I have two offerings really. One is 4 months, one is 6 months, but I'm trying to do something shorter because, shorter attention span post lockdown years. In 2 months, we're going to have a historical overview of all the various rituals and rites and ideas around the concept of the Holy Guardian Angel, paired with a commentary on a series of Thelemic rituals, such as Liber 25, the Star Ruby, Liber 44, the Mass of the Phoenix, Liber Samek, and an interactive path-working series. There's going to be maybe 2 of them, whereby, or maybe more. I'm still ironing out the details, but like as I did on my Thought Tarot Magic course on the Thought deck, I found out that pathworking really works for this kind of like online teaching because people just sit down, and I always work some music in, some theta waves in that puts more subtle trance states, and then you can receive almost a sort of download of information that resonates stronger with you. Okay, so that's what comes next. But what I'm also working in is, in fact, mixing together, blending the material from this course and the material from my previous course, the Thought Tarot Magic one, into a second book. I don't have a title for it. I don't even have a real, time frame. I think that if things go well, the manuscript will be done maybe summer next year, and then it takes another 6 months to edit it. And I don't have a contract yet of anything. Like Watkins say that they're very interested in whatever I present to them, possibly because this book sold almost its entire run in 6 months, which is something. Most books never sell more than 100 copies. Esoteric books that are successful sell 500 copies. Everything beyond that, I'm almost at 5,000 now. So it's just, to be fair, let's be honest, it's because there's a massive Aleister Crowley name on the cover. But it's good because it means that the book has resonated with people. If you look at the reviews, they're generally very favorable. So. Right. It has resonated.
Right, and the topic is still popular amongst even now. And I think that for a while there, like even when you talked about comic books and stuff, that it's still, there's a lot of comic books right now that are permeating, you know, the Crowley, there was that, what was it, the Aleister versus Adolf graphic novel that had come out absolutely. And stuff, and as well as in film and in TV, you had the Ridley Scott production of Stranger Angel, the 2 seasons.
Which interesting, you might be interested to know that me and a few others from Amity Lodge in London were visited by, once we were doing a Gnostic Mass, we're talking like many years ago now, of course, Greg Wise, which is Emma Stone's husband that plays the Magus, which is the leader of the lodge, and a bunch of others, came to see a real Gnostic Mass so that they could actually understand what they were going to do.
So the man who played Winfred Smith came to see you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And which of course in Strange Angel, it's not called Wilfred Smith. Like they changed the names of.
There's an amalgamation of characters. Yeah. Like the neighbor is like several people.
Yeah, exactly. It's Malina and a few others all in one, right? But the point is, he came along. He was very respectful. He was really like, it was interesting. So you see that in the show, he has like a scarring on his chest.
Yes.
Because the idea is that that's something that's done it's supposedly done in a specific degree of the OTO. So like it was really, they asked the real questions, and I think, to be fair, I really loved Strange Angel. It's not perfect.
I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. And
I was so disappointed that it ended, because the way that the second season ended is just when it's starting to get good.
I agree with you. And of course, you know, it ended on that mega cliffhanger with Hubbard at the door. I really think they did a very good job. A lot of Thelemites completely hate it because it's like, oh, it's all they all showed our rituals. There's no sex in our rituals. And I always thought, like, yeah, maybe that's a bug, not a feature, right? that you know,
it's made for TV. You know, it's just you know, it's made for a populist audience that. Yeah, you know.
At the same time, I think it's good television, right? And I really enjoyed it. I also think that, if, for instance, like maybe we can close on this. Like, if anybody is curious about what Thelema should be like, and why I was drawn to Thelema myself, if you watch the first episode of the second season of Strange Angel, it opens on a scene of Thelemites from Agape Lodge, of all colors and shapes and whatnot, just enjoying themselves in the streets. And they all love each other, they're all having great time together, and they're just enjoying life. That's what it should be about.
Another note with Wilfred Talbot Smith. I tried to do a little investigating in that because I was curious after seeing, you know, the show and stuff. And somebody wrote a book about his experience, but it's a very hard to find book.
I have it. It's called The Unknown God by Martin Starr.
Yes.
It's a difficult book to find because it shows. So Martin Starr is still alive. I met him once in Chicago in 2003. And at the time, he was already getting out of Thelema and focusing only on Freemasonry. But Martin Starr was a fundamental figure in the reconstruction of Ordo Templi Orientis, and especially in the reconstruction of the AA, that lineage of the AA in close connection with Ordo Templi Orientis. So in many ways, he spent the 90s recreating the AA from scratch, trying to prop up the idea that only them were the real Thelemites. What happened there is that at some point, I can say that I'm a very good friend with Peter Levenda, with many other names. I met him once and we never collaborated, but I know a lot of people know him. And I think what happens at some point is that he realized that the Frankenstein monster that he created, you know, he lost control of it. And so
As in all Frankenstein tales, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And he really wrote that book almost as a cautionary tale of what happened to Wilfred Smith, which was by all means like gaslighted and harassed and abused by Crowley, because Crowley didn't like him really. And even if he was possibly one of the most devoted to the cause that were there.
That's what I was always interested in, is how he became, the agape leader in the west coast of California in the 40s, or, you know.
Well, I mean, he was the only one around, but also you got to understand, I mean, he wasn't just the lodge master. He was a 10 degree. So, I mean, he was a national grandmaster by today's parlance. You would have him, Ramaka 10, as the leader of OTO US, and then you would have Frater Akkad, Charles Stansfield Jones, as the leader, the worldwide, the national leader of Canada. So, I mean, we were talking about very high-ranking members here in an organization that was really diaphanous at best. Like the OTO, it was always been like few members. I mean, we have more members now, of members of the OTO now, that ever were during Crowley's time, for instance, right? So, you know, long story short, I really think that Martin Starr wrote that book as a cautionary tale.
Is it a good read?
It's a very good book. It's a very good book.
I have to seek it out.
It's a very good book. You can let's say there are virtual ways you can read that book if you look for it. I mean, the reality there is that as most books from Martin Starr, from Titan Press, 930 Publishing, those books are never been reprinted and taken off production of publication, because Jaime Neusbeth, Bill Breeze doesn't want people to know the truth of certain things, because the more people know about how for instance, the fact that the OTO never really existed, the more it dissolves this house of cards that he has constructed and still sells to folks, right? So
yeah. We're always cleaning up the past and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the way that I mean, much in the way that like Scientology is constantly kind of cleaning their past up, or coming up with new responses to old questions.
So yeah, exactly. So that that people have to buy it again, pretty much. So I mean, like, that's it. Like, folks want to know more about me, I'm online at marcovisconti.org. That's my website. You can also find all the courses I teach.
Yes. Yeah, the coursework is at the same location.
All the coursework is on marcovisconti.org. I have I'm still on social media. I don't know for how much longer. I'm definitely not as involved as I used to be. But I will do the occasional YouTube video. I will do the occasional YouTube live stream. I will do the occasional Instagram reel and things like that. But like I said, I really want to do it when I have something to say, as opposed to, every week just because I have to produce content, right? That's not it. That's not it.
Well, Marco, it certainly has been a fantastic interview, and the Aleister Crowley Manual, Thelemic Magick for Modern Times. I'm almost done with it. I'd say about 3/4 of the way done. I was rushing to try to get it done before the interview.
But you can go back into the practices then.
Yeah, I plan on rereading it too, because I was just trying to move along and try to, gather a sense of what your approach was in the book and stuff. And I thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and hope to talk to you again soon.